Good evening, everyone. Good evening to all the folks who make up our resilient and amazing learning communities. We see you, educators, students, parents, grandparents, guardians, and community members. Great to be with you again in our virtual space and on the eve of a well-deserved 3-day weekend. Tonight, I will be sharing the results of the latest member survey on the physical reopening of schools, giving an update on bargaining, and talking about efforts to protect students from anti-Asian harassment and bullying when we return to in-person learning in August. First up are the results of the UTLA member survey we conducted this month on a range of issues. The first section of the survey was on safety. The survey shows that LA educators overwhelmingly feel that union negotiated safety protocols have kept their students and families safe from the spread of COVID-19. 81% of those surveyed agree that the negotiated protocols contributed to a safe physical reopening of schools, and 87% report that their school or work sites are consistently implementing the safety protocols. I must give a shout out here to mother of 2 LAUSD students, Erin Plas Campo Amor, for her letter published in the LA Times that discussed the role that educators and this union have played to keep our schools and students safe. Our COVID-19 safety negotiations are responsible for the lowest number of infections among the nation's largest school districts. According to the online dashboard for New York City schools, NYC has had nearly 26,000 coronavirus cases since reopening in September. According to Chicago's dashboard, schools there have had about 1,700 cases since they opened in March. LAUSD has had fewer than 300 cases since reopening in April. So shout out to Erin and to all our parents who stood strong in the face of intense, misguided pressure to reopen schools too early. Let us remember that some reactionary forces wanted educators and students back into school before vaccines were available, before LA exited the highest tier of infections, and before necessary safety and health protocols were in place. Our hard-fought battle helped suppress the spread of COVID-19 and save lives, especially in our most at-risk communities of color. And now, more results from the UTLA member survey. The survey asked about the impact of the physical return to schools and what has been the most challenging and most rewarding aspects. Educators rank the hybrid schedules as the most challenging aspect of the return. As far as the most rewarding aspect, this should come as no surprise. UTLA members ranked in-person engagement with students as the most rewarding part of being back physically in schools. The survey also asked educators to prioritize ways to spend the infusion of funding coming to the school district from President Joe Biden's American Rescue Plan and Sacramento. LAUSD will be receiving between $2 billion and $4 billion in one-time money for pandemic recovery and additional increases in ongoing state funding when the state budget is passed. The number one choice for UTLA survey respondents was to use the funding to reduce class sizes. Reducing class size will allow students to benefit from increased personal attention and instructional help. a move that could not be more timely given the past year's challenges. Educators who have worked every day during this crisis, who rebuilt their practice to meet the moment. These are the people who know what our students and their families need because they interact with them on a daily basis. The most powerful way we can impact students is to have more caring adults on campus, more staff members teaching, counseling, providing mental health support, and working with our special needs students, and engaging hearts and minds with a rich curriculum that includes arts, physical education, and music. That is how we lift our students out of the stress and trauma of the past year and build the joyful, restorative learning communities that our students deserve. On the survey, the next two top priorities were a salary increase for educators and technology upgrades for the entire education community. Now, an update on bargaining with the district over the necessary conditions for schools to physically open in a traditional model for the next school year. LA Unified plans to fully reopen for the 21-22 school year with an overwhelming majority of staff and students physically attending school 5 days per week unless pandemic conditions change for the worse. There will be a virtual option for families who choose it, and the district has acknowledged that some staff members may need to stay home for health reasons. Safety continues to be a priority at the bargaining table so we can ensure that COVID-19 related protocols are in place before summer school begins on June 23rd, and to protect students, families, and educators who are in our school buildings year-round, including our early childhood education community. It is so important that we can get those health and safety measures in place before some in the education community return to campuses later this month. We bargained yesterday, and we will be back at it again next week. We also continue to press for the supports our students need for a healthy, healing, and equitable return next year. UTLA's proposals include lower class sizes, increased social emotional support for students, expanded support for special education and arts instruction, and educator recruitment and retention measures. As a part of the same struggle on a different playing field, we are working with the Reclaim Our Schools LA Coalition to build a district budget for next year around a similar set of demands that meet the needs of our students and communities. Rallies and news conferences are in the works, and delegations of parents, educators, and students are meeting with school board members. It is all a part of Reclaim Our School LA's campaign to pressure the LA School Board to spend the new federal and state money in LAUSD in a racially just, educationally just way. The action plan builds towards June 22nd when the LAUSD School Board passes its budget. LAUSD is receiving a record-setting amount of funding. It is a level of funding most of us have not seen in our lifetimes. It could be a game changer for our kids if allocated equitably. This is the time, and as a union and as a part of Reclaim Our Schools Coalition, to fight for transformational change in our public schools and our society. And now on to a community effort to address the rise in violence and hate crimes against Asian American and Pacific Islander people. Since March 2020, the Stop AAPI Hate Group has received more than 6,000 firsthand reports of anti-Asian bullying, harassment, and violence. Cal State San Bernardino's Center for Study of Hate and Extremism found a 164% increase in reports of anti-Asian hate crimes in the first 3 months of 2021. UTLA is a part of a coalition of Asian American and Pacific Islander civil rights organizations calling on LA Unified to take extra measures to protect our students, their families, and the entire education community from anti-Asian harassment and bullying when we return to in-person learning in August. At a news conference this week at LAUSD headquarters, students told painful stories of violence and hate during the pandemic, as well as long-standing discrimination and racism they have faced in schools. Let us listen to 16-year-old Millie Liao.
When I was in elementary school, the shape of my eyes were constantly mocked, and my classmates made fun of my mom for her Chinese accent and broken English and would impersonate her during lunch. It's funny because this type of behavior was never called out, not by me, not by my classmates, not even by my teacher. Bystanders turned a blind eye when even just one word could have helped so much. When I asked my middle school teacher if I could switch seats because a student kept calling me derogatory terms, I was shut down because that would be too much work for her. The silence from all other parties when Asian American youth face discrimination makes it feel normal, makes it feel like we just have to toughen up and deal with it. But there's only so much we can take. We're still kids, we're still growing, and sometimes we get scared. And the worst part is we're scared because we can't change the part of us that people hate. Most of all, we're scared because this year we have to go back to school. Every single time we turn on the TV or go onto social media, we see more of our people being harassed, beaten, and killed. And many of us are terrified of what we will have to face when schools reopen. Every single Asian American student who too faces each day with the burden of bat eater and slitty eyes, we will not be silenced. You will not be silenced.
Wow, Millie, so powerful. Students like Millie are agents of change, and they are leading the way. UTLA is committed to working with AAPI community organizations and with LAUSD to provide community-centered training for staff and educators and establish district-wide protocols for reporting and addressing any level of anti-Asian violence or bullying. These include adopting restorative justice responses instead of punitive measures for students involved. Every parent, regardless of background, should not have to fear bullying and harassment of their kids, especially at school. And now on to an issue that has sparked an intense and emotional debate. At this month's regional area meetings, some UTLA members brought up motions about the crisis in the Middle East. These motions were debated and discussed, and they passed in some of the 8 regional meetings. They did not pass in all of the meetings. This is part of our democratic process as a union. Any UTLA member can bring an issue to our regional meetings to be discussed and debated. Motions that are passed then move on to the UTLA House of Representatives, our highest decision-making body, whose next meeting takes place in September. Motions brought by UTLA members at regional meetings are not the official expressed opinions of UTLA or its elected leaders. Debate and disagreement are essential to democracy and to our union, even when there are deep, conflicting emotions on both sides. Social media is often a counterforce to a healthy debate because its algorithms can reward conflict and spread misinformation. Frankly, it is painful to watch the truth be distorted when the issues are so serious. As educators, it is our job to create nurturing, safe environments for all of our students. UTLA stands against racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, homophobia, Islamophobia, and oppression in all forms. We stand against both anti-Jewish hate and violence and anti-Arab hate and violence wherever they occur. And we denounce the recent attacks on Jewish people in Los Angeles. As an educator for more than 26 years, I mourn the loss of every innocent child that has been caught in the middle of this conflict. And I deplore the destruction of schools on both sides and the conversion of places of learning into emergency shelters housing displaced people. Getting an excellent public education is and continues to be a human right, no matter what country or territory you reside in. And this principle should unite us as a global public education community. Before I close, I would like to share some unfortunate news with you. This week, we learned that former UTLA President Robert Russell Unruh passed away. Bob always told his Boy Scouts to leave the campsite in better condition than you found it. After 97 years, he left his community better off as well. Bob created and directed Clear Creek Camp, the first outdoor education program for the LA Unified School District in the mountains above Los Angeles. He then began a long career as a high school civics and history teacher in the 1950s, principally at Hamilton High School. A teacher through and through, he carried a copy of the Constitution in his pocket every day of his life, ready to pull it out should a question arise. Not one to tolerate the poor pay and lack of respect given teachers in the 1950s, Bob was soon helping to organize a campaign that eventually led to the formation of United Teachers Los Angeles. As head of the negotiating committee, Bob was the highest ranking officer not jailed for contempt of court when the teachers struck for union recognition. His children remember him watching on the television news every night. Bob was elected president of UTLA in 1973. Bob was a fighter. When he thought something was wrong, he spoke up, especially on behalf of those on the margins of our society. At the same time, his mind was open. Late in life, he disassociated from the Boy Scouts because they refused to allow gay scout leaders. He was a veteran who campaigned for peace, helping to organize a Beyond War chapter in Ojai and installing a peace pole at his home. He was a practicing Christian who believed strongly in the value of all religions. Our thoughts are with the UNRUHE family and everyone whose lives he touched. Truly, our union stands on the shoulders of the pioneers who came before us. Rest in power, Bob, and may your memory be a blessing. Now I'll say goodnight as we head off into a 3-day weekend. There are only 2 more weeks in the school year. Yes, educators, you made it. I know you need your summer break, and I know you will miss your babies too. All the learning that was built with families over this crazy year, and now you have to say goodbye as well. Maybe you shared this sentiment that a UTLA member posted on Facebook. This has felt like the longest school year ever, but it also feels like we just got back. Whatever you're feeling, chances are it's complicated. I hope you're rolling into the weekend with an eye toward doing something that restores you. In my house, Memorial Day weekend will mean practicing karate moves with Giovanni, taking in a few walks and bike rides, and going to see the Art of the Brick at the Science Center. He's a huge Lego fan. Until next time, stay strong, UTLA strong, because together we rise.